Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad you could join us tonight. My name is Rich Shortall. I'm Executive Coordinator of Fire Safe Marin. This is our second in a series of webinars/workshops. We're calling them workshops because they're really meant to be an opportunity for principal agencies from the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority to showcase the great work that they've been doing in their local neighborhoods. So tonight we have Southern Marin, which is Mill Valley and Southern Marin, all those communities down there. We're going to talk about the work that they're doing. A lot of this work is funded from the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. We work very closely with them, and all of us are working around a similar theme of adaptation to wildfire. It's no longer Smokey the Bear, put out all the wildfires, prevent all wildfires. We know wildfires are going to be with us, so we need to learn how to adapt to that. And the types of programs that our fire agencies are undertaking are designed to do just that. You will get an opportunity to ask questions later on. Please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. You can type in the answer and we'll get to that. So with that said, I'd like to introduce our two guests from Southern Marin Fire. Again, we have Jesse Figoni and Marshall Now. Guys, turn it over to you and look forward to hearing what you got to say tonight.
Thank you. Thank you, Rich. Just happy to be here and obviously discuss our projects that we have going on, funded through the MWPA. And so welcome everyone. I'm Jesse, Vegetation Management Specialist for Southern Marin Fire, Mill Valley Fire Department. Kind of like I was saying previously, we're here to discuss our more or less large-scale projects funded through the MWPA. So let's begin. So a lot of our projects incorporate fuel breaks, and for those of you that are not familiar with fuel breaks, they're more or less designed to mitigate the threat of wildfire in areas where there's a lot of buildup of combustible vegetation, and where more or less fire-prone vegetation is prevalent. So our strategy for identifying fuel breaks is to utilize data and what we have. So we utilize the Community Wildfire Protection Plan. And back in 2020, we actually had a wildland hazard mitigation assessment throughout our whole district, which really highlighted areas where we need to address these areas where we have this buildup of combustible vegetation adjacent to homes. So we typically determine these in the high to very high severity zones in very strategic locations. And like I was saying, fuel modeling shows that where these vulnerable areas are. So scope of work, your general scope of work for a fuel break consists of reducing ladder fuels. The last thing we want to see is any embers landing any ground surface fuels and then igniting those low-hanging branches. So we always want to see tree branches limbed up from the ground 8 to 10 feet for these fuel breaks, and then look at removing non-native trees or hazardous trees, cypress trees, eucalyptus trees. We have a ton of those in our district. And then brush removal and removal of invasive species of vegetation such as broom, which a lot of these projects incorporate. So strategy, kind of like I was saying, we want to reduce the ground fuels. One second, technical difficulties. There we go. So construction involves selectively thinning out and removing more flammable understory vegetation while leaving the majority of larger, more fire-tolerant tree species, such as oak trees and redwoods. And these areas where we're prioritizing these fuel breaks more or less haven't been treated before, and we have a dangerous buildup of combustible vegetation in these areas. So these are our current and future project sites. So we have Sausalito, Tam Valley, City of Mill Valley, Strawberry, and Tiburon. And that approach is we want to reduce risk throughout the whole district. So that's why we've chosen these strategic areas where we want to do work in. So this is kind of like more or less a progress of where we're at. So in Sausalito, I'll show a map here shortly. We currently have a fuel break that was approved back in 2022 MWPA project cycle. And what's being done right now is we really want to develop the scope of work for this project. You know, we want to dial it in, make sure we're trying to achieve what we're trying to achieve, you know, typically 100, 150 feet from structures into this open space area. Tam Valley. So Tam Valley Homestead fuel break. This was back in the 21-22 cycle. Same kind of thing. We're currently looking at developing the scope of work. We're doing site visits. You know, we're working with partnering agencies like Homestead Valley Land Trust, Open Space, GGNRA, National Park Service. And last month, we actually filed the notice of exemption. So that's the environmental compliance component. City of Mill Valley. This is the project where we actually have boots on the ground. This is back in the 21-22 cycle. Work started in 2021 and will be completed by the end of 2022. So it's actually good to see finally, you know, we can more or less tie up one of our projects because we got a lot more in the works, which is a good thing. And then Strawberry Tiburon. So this is for the new MWPA project cycle. This is for the 22-23. I've done a site visit recently with Marin County Open Space, and we're currently developing and tweaking the map for the scope of work. So this is a Sausalito fuel break. So this is the grand scale project that we're trying to do. Highway 101 is a frequent traveler, a heavily trafficked area where, you know, a lot of things can go wrong. We can have a vehicle fire, we can have a road start by a cigarette, a chain dragging, a faulty Cadillac converter. So we do have risk in a lot of areas, and we really want to address that by having this large scale fuel break. And as you can see, you do have some, you know, kind of open space areas. Cypress Ridge is a perfect example. That's kind of the center of the project. You can see where it kind of goes into Sausalito. So we certainly want to address that area. And what we're trying to do with these projects is expand defensible space. So whatever the homeowner does, you know, 100 feet, 150 feet, depending on slope, we're looking at expanding that from the property line into these open space. So if their property line only goes 70 feet to that and then stops right there, we want to expand that into the open space to make sure they have that adequate defensible space. So this is a multi-agency collaboration. We have the City of Sausalito, we have Caltrans, we have the National Park Service, and right now we're going through the CEQA documentation with our environmental consultants for best land management practices. Tam Valley Homestead fuel break. So this is another one that was in the 2022 cycle. We currently have the scope of work completed. We've worked with Homestead Valley Land Trust, Tamalpais Community Service District, National Park Service, and this is the one where the NOE was filed last month. And we're currently looking at getting some site visits with contractors come August 2022. And actually, this project builds upon the Tam Valley fuel break that was a grant which was awarded back in 2020. So we're currently expanding on previous efforts to mitigate risk in the community. Mill Valley Shelter fuel break. So this is the actual project where we have boots on the ground. And it's a very substantial, large budget, but this is a pretty substantial project. You know, it's great to see, you know, finally all the work paying off, you know, and going through all the meetings, site visits, bidding from contractors, environmental compliance. And as you can see, this is actually a 47-acre project where we're developing 100, 150 feet of defensible space from structures into county parks land. So these are actually some photos. Unfortunately, I do not have after photos because we are currently removing all this brush, combustible material off the hillside as we speak. And so this area is Glen Drive and Heather Way, where, as you can see, there's a substantial amount of invasive removal. So we have a lot of broom here. And once that broom is pulled from the hillside, it's going to look way different. And on the backside of this picture, which you can't see, I was about 30 feet from structure. So you can just imagine the potential risk here if this broom wasn't removed. So it's great to see that, you know, we're doing a lot of good work in the community. This is Del Casa Road and Sarah Drive. On the left-hand side, that's what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to achieve a shaded fuel break by limbing up trees, removing understory, making sure the grasses are maintained. And that's the type of material on Sarah Drive that we're removing. So a lot of good work being done out there. Ring Mountain Fuel Break. So this is the proposed 2022-2023 project that we just recently completed a site visit with. Myself, Marin County Parks, park rangers. We assessed the area on what type of fuels we have. Certain areas on the western side of this project, kind of where the start of it, or actually where that number 1 Vista Tiburon Drive is, that is Ute Grove, where we do have a lot of slash, understory, dead material mixed with invasives such as broom. You know, this project kind of hits what we're trying to do. We're trying to mitigate risk from structures. As you can see, there's spotted areas where the red is where we're doing work, in other areas where we're not, because that is actually outside the scope of work. So we're really staying within the compliance here. And we have a mix of light, flashy fuels such as grasses kind of on the northeast side, and you know, mix of invasives too in certain areas where there's a lot of broom. Marshall.
Thank you, Jesse. So before we jump into LRAD, you know, listening to everything Jesse was saying there, a lot of great work getting done, a lot of projects in the works, both boots on the ground and, you know, tentatively, you know, pending environmental compliance or anything else. But it really rings to me, you know, the old adage, you know, slow and steady wins the race. You know, it's a test against time. At this point, you know, we're chasing, you know, fire season approaching and trying to get ready, you know, whether it's this season or next season, whatever we're preparing for. But what all the hard work Jesse's doing and all the other agencies throughout Marin County is that slow process, that methodical attention to detail and compliance. And what it's going to do, it's going to build a level of sustainability behind all those fuel breaks. And I'm very familiar with that because I have the projects that are on the other side of that coin, the other side of that MWPA funding, which is emergency evacuation and notification. So if you're not familiar with LRAD, these sirens are much more than just your standard, you know, rotating beacon siren. You're going to get much more than just a tone out of them. You're going to get verbiage. You're going to get information, just-in-time information is what we're calling it. That could be critical to that incident or the scenario that we're running into. And each one of these sites that you see on this map, and quite a few of them popping up throughout our southern region, will be able to be independently operated and activated with their own specific messages if necessary. So Southern Marin, we're building on the back of what the city of Mill Valley brought in 2019. So they brought online 5 LRAD. They brought that technology to Marin County. We jumped on MWPA with 5 potential sites. We installed 2 of those. That's our fire stations. So one in Tam Valley in 2021, another one in Strawberry on our fire stations. Those are photographs up here in the corners on top of our fire stations. They're accessible to our crews. They were not initially commissioned to be tested, but we started that testing in December on a monthly cycle, along with what the city of Mill Valley was doing. And I had the honor once again to stand in the southern region on a Saturday, the first Saturday of the month, just this last weekend during 4 of our evacuation drills we held in one day, and to hear those sirens and the messages echoing throughout the valley. But one thing we really need from the community is a little bit more feedback. So in 2022, the beginning of this year, we launched the Did You Hear It campaign, modeled off of what the USGS does with earthquakes. But we want our community to give us feedback on whether they heard it, or more importantly, if they didn't hear it. and the quality of what they heard. And that's going to really provide us with that information that will allow us to modify and adjust our existing sirens and selectively choose new locations to install these. And with that, we've been modeling and mapping where we could potentially install those. So just last night, actually, sitting in front of Mill Valley City Council, we passed a resolution to install an additional site to their existing 5 on the Edgewood Reservoir, which was funded through MWPA. We're preparing in late June, early July to be taking to council in the city of Sausalito for 2, potentially 3 additional sites. Confirmed right now is we're looking at one just below Wolfback Ridge that would provide that community information, and then down by Rodeo, which is by a water tower that's there. Those are purchased and available for installation as soon as July 2022, all 3 of those sites. So right now we're budgeting for an additional 2 sites. And that's when the numbers really start coming together. That's where this map is that you hear. We're trying to look at multiple sites in this next year because some are a little bit more difficult to install than others. They have different things, different hoops, different environmental compliance, a lot of different features. So we're trying not to rush these sites when it comes to selection, but we want to be able to install them very promptly once they do pass all the requirements. So right now we're looking at by the end of 2022, there's a very high probability that there will be 11 or 12 LRAD sites, including those initial 5 from Mill Valley throughout the southern region, all coordinating together. And then with this new budgeted cycle and the additional ones, we're looking at probably around 14 in total installed throughout the rest of the southern region by the end of 2023. And again, like I said, we have about 5 or 6 additional sites, and these are all mapped out here on the map, ranging throughout the region. So we're really partnering with other agencies and other areas, other municipalities that could benefit from these to try and expand this from just a Mill Valley Southern Marin siren system to a southern region, kind of testing that mold in Marin County for potential use other places. So that's where we're at right now. A lot of really great things are happening. Like I said, we encourage everyone to come back and try that Did You Hear It campaign on our website. There's a relatively easy form. Also, our entire LRAD program is available on the smfd.org website that walks you through where we are, and we try and keep that updated with where these projects are for each site, so you can keep track of how we're doing there. So I'll pass it back to Jesse to kind of wrap up before we go any further.
Yeah, thank you, Marshall. So I believe that is the end of the presentation. So if there's any questions or answers, I'm going to stop sharing my screen now.
All right, wonderful. Well, Marshall, Jesse, that was great. We really appreciate it. A lot of exciting things happening there. First question, maybe I'll start with Marshall. This actually comes from the audience. One of the audience members heard the test that you did last Saturday, and his observation, which I think is not unusual, is he was in his home and he heard the test, but he couldn't understand the verbal part of it.
Yeah.
So what is the expectation of an LRAD system?
Yeah. So, and like I said, that other component of MWPA funding is emergency notification and evacuation. So we can chart an evacuation through a very systematic process from notification to full road clearing. Throughout that whole process, the whole county has a multitude of layers of evacuation notification. So Alert Marin, Nixle, whether it's Twitter, there's so many different ways. And the way one of our fire chiefs describes it really well is all of these are like Swiss cheese. They all have holes. LRAD is not going to be the end all be all. It's not really designed to wake you from your bed to get you out of bed, but hopefully it's enough to make you curious to go outside and hear what the message is. Or as you're evacuating from maybe an Alert Marin message you got, you'll pick up that message along the way, and it will give you more critical information on what roads to avoid or take, or what areas to avoid or to evacuate to. So it's kind of that streamline of evacuation. It's one of those elements. And the idea of Swiss cheese is that those holes, if enough layers of Swiss cheese go on, hopefully there's not a hole all the way through, and they've picked up where the other ones have not been able to cover it. The nice part is LRAD does have a lot of built-in redundancies that allow us to really benefit from its technology.
Maybe one last clarification on an LRAD, or oftentimes called an outdoor warning system. Is this a system that's designed to penetrate every home and wake up everybody in the middle of the night? Or is that a higher expectation than is realistic?
It's definitely not designed to penetrate every home. Just like they say, a cell phone's only as good as its battery's charged. This thing's only as good as where it can reach to. And that's why we want people to fill out this Did You Hear It form, so that we can get that information and we can be strategic to benefit the best amount of our population with the sirens that we do install.
Yeah, well, I think that's good. I think that's a very realistic, it's a wonderful program. It's a great warning system, but like you pointed out, it fits in very nicely with all the others. We can't rely on one single thing all the time. Yep. So that's good.
Thank you. Good question.
Thanks. So let me shift over to Jesse for a minute. Jesse, I think the most powerful part of your presentation for me was seeing those before photos. That was not a very healthy looking forest. Do you think there's a connection between the type of work that's being done to reduce fuels for wildfire prevention and healthy forest management? Do they go together?
Yeah, actually 100%. So everyone asks, trees are a risk, but with our shaded fuel breaks, these are very strategic locations. And, if you look back on history, we want to bring back to what the forest was 100 years ago. And trees are not necessarily the fire risk. For our projects, we take the necessary precautions to reduce the risk of making trees a hazard by limbing up branches, removing combustible vegetation below the tree and around the tree, to really break up those ladder fuels that could get up into the canopy of the tree. And so shaded fuel breaks, which we're currently actively pursuing throughout the district, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's vegetation management work that focuses in on the surface and ground fuels to prevent fire from laddering up into it. So a lot of our projects include, doing those types of things, and also, thinning out, eucalyptus groves, and, hazardous kinds of trees, bay trees.
So we're getting rid of the non-natives and we're supporting the healthy trees, the larger trees, make them healthier by reducing some of that competition and some of that mess that we see on the forest floor there.
Yep, 100%.
Great. I thought it was very clever when you described too that when you're creating one of these shaded fuel breaks, a lot of the ones, as you showed on the mapping, are actually fairly close to the backyards of homes. So it's kind of a combination of defensible space for homes and a shaded fuel break. Can you talk a little more about that?
Yeah, so defensible space, as I'm sure a lot of residents know in our community, is very important. It's their responsibility to, make their home as safe as possible in event of a fire, structure fire, or a wildfire. These fires have no boundaries. Embers are showering around homes and really put homes at risk. So residents are more or less required to maintain defensible space if they're located in the wildland urban interface. And then for shaded fuel breaks that are targeted behind these homes that are considered in vulnerable areas, we're building upon their efforts we're expanding their defensible space more or less, so we're targeting these fuel breaks in specific areas, and more or less the same treatment methods that they're using for defensible space. We're just expanding upon that. So they show a lot of similarities. Defensible space and shaded fuel breaks, it's the same concept. We're reducing combustible vegetation to help slow the rate of spread of fire and more or less allow engine crews and fire personnel to more or less protect those homes in those vulnerable areas.
Well, that's great. I think the number one concern relative to wildfire Marin residents continues to be evacuation. So how does all this work, or perhaps other work that you're doing on top of this, how does this affect evacuation routes and the ability of people to get out?
So Southern Marin and Mill Valley both has a great program called our Paved Road Fuel Reduction Program. And what this program does, we remove vegetation, hazardous vegetation that's encroaching the roadway. And I'm sure a lot of Mill Valley and Sausalito residents, Tam Valley, Homestead, we have very narrow roads in our district, and we do have these roads that are just choked full of vegetation, canopies that are stretching from one roadside to another. And what that does, that makes it very challenging for egress and access, especially for emergency vehicles. As you know, they're fairly substantial, and as you can imagine, getting up and down these roads, we're going to need maximum clearance on these roads. So what we're doing is we're clearing 8 to 10 streets a month in different specific areas throughout our district, both in Southern Marin and Mill Valley. And we're just cutting back hazardous vegetation. We're cutting back encroaching vegetation to certain regulations and our local ordinance, which requires 15 foot of clearance from the road's edge up. And then if there's any potential fire hazards along these roadways, we'll certainly want to address that up to a certain feet. So we've definitely done a lot. I believe last year we cleared about anywhere between 70 to 80 miles throughout the district, but we do have a long ways to go. And, each year we want to do more and expand on those efforts.
That's very impressive. I did get a question from an audience member. Is there a possible project similar to that along Shoreline Highway?
So Shoreline Highway, main evacuation route, and that is something we are pursuing. It is a Caltrans owned area, and we've had conversations with them, meetings with them. We are looking at partnering with them and clearing that main evacuation route. It is more or less a lifeline for a lot of residents to and from Tam Valley and out to the coast. So we want to make sure our key artery evacuation routes are nice and clear for residents in case of evacuation and make it safer for them. So we are pursuing that. And unfortunately, things take time working with Caltrans, but I think we're headed in the right direction.
That's really good. So we've talked a lot about big scale projects and whatnot that are going on. Are you doing evaluations of individual homes and giving residents advice on improvements they should be making to their properties?
Yes, we are. We have a great team of fire inspectors and defensible space inspectors that do offer that service. And all that information can be found on our website at smfd.org. You can go on there, schedule a free home assessment. Either myself or other personnel will come out, inspect your home, look for hazards, give recommendations. And then also, we do have a chipper program. So as a lot of people know, doing vegetation management is a costly endeavor. So Southern Marin Fire and Mill Valley Fire Department offers a free chipper service for residents. So we encourage residents to do more, and it's an annual service, and we'll be more than happy to assist you in any way we can.
Great. So speaking of costly endeavors, a lot of times when people take a look at their property, whether its vegetation needs to be removed or maintained better, or improvements to the home itself to harden it from wildfire, are there grants available to help people with that?
Yeah, actually there is. So to apply for those grants, you'll need an inspection done by one of our inspectors. And once that inspection is complete, I believe the dollar amount is, Marshall, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's $1,000 for home hardening and $500 for vegetation management. Does that sound correct?
That's the most current dollar amounts that I've heard. Obviously, there's talks of those numbers changing, probably for the better, if anything. But currently, that's where we sit.
Yeah. So residents can apply for that. It's more or less grant matching funds. So if a resident spends $2,000 on vegetation management, they'll get $2,000 on home hardening, whether they're replacing vents, replacing windows, siding, they'll get $1,000 back. And then same thing for vegetation management, up to $500 matching.
And I think all the guidance for that is Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority grants program. Pretty straightforward, right?
Correct.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. Good. So
I was gonna say, sorry, to initiate it, you have to go through Southern Marin Fire District to get that initial hazard assessment. That's that one-on-one opportunity to learn and focus in on your property with an expert. And then from there, those recommendations, we encourage you to go out and and make those corrections or those changes. And that gets you the MWPA grant funding.
Yeah. Have you adopted the new, relatively new reporting format that they're using in Ross Valley, some other areas are out there?
Yeah. So when we had the opportunity to get on board Southern Marin Fire and Mill Valley, took them up on that offer and started utilizing it. And that is exactly the reports that you'll see when we generate them. And that opens up that grant opportunity. It gives you that, as you're probably very familiar with, it gives you that great perspective of what level of risk your property has, really lays it all out and gives you that bullet point of, you know, what to get done and what's the priority or the requirements, and then what are those recommendations the fire department also encourages you to do.
I'm going to give a follow up on Marshall and give a little bit more of a pitch to that. Do go ahead and get that home evaluation. That's your avenue to get the grant programs out there. And if you want to see how great this form that we're talking about is, you can go to the Fire Safe Marin website or to our YouTube channel, where there's a 10-minute explanation of every part of how it works, walks you right through it. It's just a wonderful thing to take advantage of.
I'd be happy to talk about it for 10 minutes if you want.
Yeah, that's great. Unfortunately, I wish we had some more time. We're getting near the end. I've got two last questions for you. The first one, is there one particular project or thing that you are very proud of that you did in this fiscal year over there, Southern Marin?
Gosh, that's a hard one to say. You know, I think the biggest accomplishment is to see these projects from start to finish. People need to understand there's a substantial amount of time and effort that goes into these projects. You know, it's not like we're just going out there and cutting vegetation. You know, there's numerous meetings, there's site visits, there's CEQA compliance, there's contractor bidding, public outreach. There's a lot of time and effort that goes into these large scale projects. And, you know, all this couldn't be done without everyone's help and assistance from partnering agencies and the residents. So I think that's the biggest accomplishment, just getting everyone together and we just reduce the risk in the community.
Great. Is there any particular project coming up starting in the next cycle that you're especially excited about it?
Oh, the Tam Valley Homestead one. You know, that's one specifically to Southern Marin. So it's great to see that, you know, we'll be starting one here, I hope, come towards the end of this year.
Wonderful. That's great. We're looking forward to it. So anyway, we've kind of to wrap up. I want to thank you both so much for coming here. It was a great presentation. We really enjoy it. We look forward to our next get together, and really thank you. You've just done a fantastic job, and thank you to the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority for making so much of this possible. We really do appreciate that. And do you have any final words or that you want to leave with our guests?
Yeah, so every year we're going to do more and more, you know, with these large scale projects. You know, we're just going to improve upon what we did previously. So just look forward to bigger and better things happening in the future.
Wonderful. All right. Well, with that, I'm going to say thank you very much. And we will see you soon, and look forward to having more of those before and after pictures. Those are great. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Good night, everybody.